This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO greetings. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, along with my precious executive producer, Leslie Fry. And we have a very interesting topic of discussion tonight surrounding the recent murders and deaths of Black men by the hands of police all over this country. How you doing, Leslie?
Halito, Jimmy Chipmunk.
All right. And I think we have some guests in here with us tonight, don't we?
We do, but before we do that, we must do our land acknowledgement. So
Exactly.
Let's start that.
Exactly.
All right.
Can you do that for us?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of the lands that we reside on, and especially their ancestors, descendants, and all Indigenous people who live now and have ever lived on this land that we call Turtle Island and beyond. But more than acknowledgement, let's honor and support our existing Indigenous communities by helping them continue their land-based practices, traditions, and way of life, by dispelling false narratives about their history while promoting their authentic truths, helping them heal from past wrongs and offenses, and assisting them in protecting and restoring back to health the land, nature, and the water which brings life.
Thank you so much, Leslie, and Halito to you too. There's been so much violence in this country for over 500-600 years. And the violence was brought here by the European invaders. And it's time, it's well past time to talk about this subject matter. We just had a young man murdered in LA, Black man. He had a fender bender, got out for help, got out with his hands up, pleading for help. And what happened? The police chased him down and tased him to the point that when they took him to the hospital, he died from a heart attack as a result of being tased. And then we have the brother that was in LA from Washington, D.C., the young school teacher, who was actually one of the most favorite school teachers in Washington, D.C., because his whole dream was to go to college and be able to help kids learn. And then just, I think it was yesterday, this young man that was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's just too much of it. And we need to do something about this. I understand people are protesting and they fired the cops, but one thing I can say is the 5 police officers in Memphis that they fired, not one of them were white, they were Black. So what do we have to say about that? Are they following their police training? Have they been colonialized in their minds that if a Black guy don't look right to you, that you have the right to take his life or beat him so bad? And the cause of death was a brutal beating. He bled inside because of this beating. And we can go way back through history and see this whole thing happening over and over and over again. So that's what we're going to address tonight. Also, I wish my sister could be here with us tonight, Judith Foster, but she's unable to be with us. Her son, Paul Fyffe, was murdered at a nightclub, a college nightclub in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it smells of a cover-up. And she's been trying for 12 years to get some answers. But every time she calls down there, the sheriff department are very disrespectful to her. The police department, very disrespectful to her. So we need to do something about this. If we can't do something about this, we can at least address the issue and warn our brothers and sisters, but especially our Black brothers and sisters. So we have some guests with us tonight. Can you bring them in?
Yes, I will.
All right. Okay, so I see we have my good friend for the last 35 years or so, the Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler. Hey, brother, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. It's good to be with you, talking about these significant issues, my brother.
Absolutely. I have Carolyn Q. Tillery. I like your glasses, Carolyn. Can you hear me? Uh-oh, I think she
looks like she might be frozen.
Frozen.
There she is.
Carol, can you hear me, Carolyn? Okay. I can't hear you. Can you check to see if you're muted or unmuted?
She's not muted. I think we're having some delay issues.
Okay, no problem. And I have my other brother, Tony Leon, once a Marine, always a Marine. Semper Fi, bro. How you doing?
Hey, good evening, Jay. Good evening to all your guests. Privileged to be here.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, Tony Leon is my name. I am Afro-Latino, half Cuban, half Dominican, all Black.
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised in Washington, D.C., currently residing in beautiful Prince George's County, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, and I'm trying to be an activist as best as I can to uplift, truth.
Yes, absolutely.
Concrete truth, bring it forward. Justice, bring forward justice.
Absolutely. Thank you, bro, for being with us tonight. Carolyn, can you hear me now? Okay, we got issues with her. There's something happening there, but we'll straighten that out, hopefully. And of course, Leslie Fry.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here tonight and to discuss this particular topic, which is very dear to my heart. So let's get into it. We've got an audience out there that are waiting to hear what we have to say about the topic.
Okay, let's start with you, Brother Rodney. What are your thoughts on all of these Black men and Native men too that are being murdered by the police at will?
It's unfortunate that we have to continue to talk about this. It seems as though we have so often had these conversations, whether it be for a young boy going out to buy a drink and some Skittles for his brother, whether it be for a young child going out to play cops and robbers in a park, whether it be for a young man coming home after a hard day, going to his door, trying to get his keys out of his pocket. So many people have been killed by police. So many people have been violated because police don't believe that they are equal. that their lives are worthy of respect, that they are, I unfortunately think we have to say, the police who are trained as a military force have somehow or another keyed in on black and brown men as though we are the enemy. And they have decided slowly but surely to eliminate or otherwise control us. And we've got to begin to shift that larger narrative. We've got to begin to change the way that things take place. I know that in the city of Charlotte, in addition to the story that that you'll talk a bit more about tonight, you mentioned a little bit about Brother Fyffe and what happened to him. But even before he was killed, or right around the same time, actually, there was a gentleman named Jonathan Farrell. And Jonathan Farrell's story is a hard one because he was a young man who was out with his friends one evening. And he, being the responsible adult he was, decided that he wasn't going to drink. He was going to be the designated driver. So as he took the last of his friends to their house, he was in a neighborhood that was unfamiliar and had a lot of twists and turns. He ran off the road, his car flipped over, and he was upside down in his car. He kicked the back window out of his car and then got up to look around for help. He ran and knocked on a door of a house. A woman, white woman, with her children there, opened the door, saw this large black man bleeding and asking for help. She screamed, slammed the door, and called the cops on him. He went around looking for someone else to help him. When he saw the police come, he ran toward the cops, trying to get assistance. They shot him. This young man who was a threat to no one, this young man who was a graduate of Florida State University, a Seminole, this young man who was, his sister was a sergeant in a police force, had no enmity whatsoever toward the police, but was gunned down because they did not think of him as valuable and imagined him to be the enemy. We've got to begin to shift this narrative. We've got to begin to change the way that black and brown men are viewed in our society. We've got to begin to recognize that every human being is a child of God, made in God's image, and therefore deserves to be respected as such, as Dr. King said.
Absolutely. Tony Leon, your thoughts?
A couple of points on what the Reverend said. There, from what I've been noticing, and I've been tracking these murders by police for a while, there's an image of black people, black men in particular, that's been put out there by the media, and you can go all the way back to the slavery days and the days of Jim Crow. That portrayed us as savages. And it still goes on today in the media. If you watch television, the programs that come on show us as criminals, drug dealers, murderers, rapists, so on and so forth. And as the Reverend was talking about how this young man went and knocked on the door and asked for help, I can only imagine that this lady had that mindset when she saw this man standing on her porch and assumed that he was going to commit some type of crime and call the cops. The police, I think, also have that mindset too. When they pull a car over, automatically they get out the car with their hand on their gun or close to their side because they assume the worst is about to happen. And it's all of that, I believe, comes from this imagery that we continue to have, and it's got to stop.
And I was just
Can I just say one thing in follow up too?
Sure,
I don't want to interrupt, but I just there's a commercial on TV right now that emphasizes this point. There's a man who's driving his car, and he goes up as Aaron Donald is walking an older woman across the street. Aaron Donald's a defensive lineman for, I think, the LA, for the Rams, I think it is, or the Chargers. I'm not sure, one of those two teams. But he's standing next to this woman. The guy drives the car up, screeches to a stop, sees him and this woman, looks at Aaron Donald, gets out of his car and runs away. Now everyone thinks, oh, that's just a funny commercial, you know, big football player terrifies him. But it exacerbates the image of the black man as a brute, as Tony said, as a beast, as something to be feared. And this has significant consequences on real people's lives.
Can I also make a comment about this real quickly?
Of course.
One of the things that we have to realize about what we now recognize as a police force was something that was established as slave catchers back in the day. You know, it was this law enforcement as we know of it today was initiated because it was to go after runaway slaves. So therein lies the history of what it is. Now, I am not, and I'm probably going to be the last person, not well thought of by saying this, but I'm someone who doesn't believe in defunding the police. What I believe in doing when it comes to a police force is a police force funding money so that they will know their community that they serve. The biggest problem that we have here is that most of these police officers do not know their community. If they knew their community, if they socialized with their community, if they did events with their community like they used to do back in the old days, we probably wouldn't have this much violence towards people within the community, especially if it's a white officer serving within a black community. You know, I was raised on the border of Ferguson and Florissant, and I understand completely what that dynamic is like. Most of the white police officers that were in the Ferguson Police Department really didn't know their community. It was more that they lauded over the community. And it used to be that my mother used to tell us whenever we would drive in that area, be very careful while you're driving over there because you know how the police officers are. We were warned of this driving over in that area. As you all know, what accumulated from that with the death of Michael Brown is what has, started off a flame of these type of violent situations within the police force. I have a lot of family members that are in the police force. I am a big advocate for the police, but I do feel that a reworking of the mentality of the police force is what is needed here. We are living in a more violent society. We have to be honest about that situation. I understand that police officers must protect themselves at all costs, but not to the point where it is excessive and not to the point that they cannot control themselves. Remember, people are innocent until they are guilty. And this is always a mentality they should have before they go after anybody that is a suspect.
Great. Now, can I say something? When I was growing up, I grew up in Washington, D.C., up in an area of far northeast, Deanwood. And we had one police station, number 14 Police Precinct. Every cop in that station, and I mean, it was a lot of them, they even worked with the boys' clubs, the girls' clubs, and they knew all of us. I can remember a couple of times I was out in the streets, not even a teenager, showing off. And I really loved this guy. His name was William Wiggs, Billy Wiggs. He was a cop. And he walked over to me. He said, you shouldn't be acting like that. And I looked at him, I said, well, what am I doing? Come on, you going with me. Are you going to lock me up? No, I'm taking you to your father. He said, your father and I are friends, and he's not going to like how you came out of his house and embarrassed him. That's the kind of community relationship that we're lacking.
It was a village. It was a village.
Yes,
it was a village, and we don't have that any longer.
No. The school teachers at my elementary school, junior high school, they all knew the police because we had at least twice a year during the school year, police day. And the cops would show up. We didn't fear them, but we knew that they were the authority and that we knew that what we did would definitely affect how they treated us. So, yeah, I'd love to see that again, but that's what, 70 years ago?
I mean, it's so bad that we even fear actually asking the police for help, especially when it's in need. You're talking about this young man Reverend Rodney, that was killed because he was asking for help. I mean, the progress of that situation would be, or the situation would be that they would call the police in a situation where somebody's in need. However, the fact that he was looked at as a criminal and not someone is in need is horrific. So why would we even involve the police in anything when it comes to a crime or something that we see, when we are thinking that we're going to be affected or actually looked at as the villain here?
Tony?
I'd like to give two more cases where the police were involved in killings. On January the 2nd of this year, someone named Takar Smith was also murdered by the police. On January the 3rd, Oscar Sanchez was killed by the police. Both of these men were experiencing mental health crisis. So this is another thing that's going on out here that the police have not adapted to, the mental health crisis that we have. And like Les was saying, some of that funding needs to go towards mental health experts, or what they call people who have the skills to deal with mental health. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in, and that happened in California too.
Go ahead, Leslie. Go ahead, Leslie.
So, my sister is a police officer. She's a detective. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that she saw a need for that. But the thing is, you said it, the funding to handle mental cases with people who have a history of mental issues. How do they handle that? How do they resolve it? How do they diffuse the situation? Because when there is aggravation on the part of the police, then the other person becomes agitated. And therefore this is causing the problem. You have people that are innocent just because they are not in their full mental capacity, that are dying at the hands of police, that should be in treatment. And this is what's needed. I believe that there are police forces that are actually, they have a segment within the police force itself that deals specifically with people with mental case issues, because they know they have people that have habitual, situations. But normally in a small city or in a small town or an underfunded community, we don't have that. And they are looked at as criminals or disturbing the peace or whatever it is, and therefore they are treated as such.
Okay, I have a point to make. All of this started out with the colonization of the United States of America. They thought of African people and they brought them over here, not as a whole person or a whole man. They came here to exterminate my people, the American Indian. But the problem I have is, why don't they, when they interview these guys, they need more than just a light psychological evaluation. They need to know where they grew up and who are the people they grew up around, this, that, and the other. Decolonization of the mind would go a long way to help us with this issue. What do you think, Carolyn? Can you hear us? Are you there, Carolyn? Okay, I like the music. Okay, we'll come back to Carolyn. What do you think about that, Rodney?
I just wanted to comment. I see Harold Moran's question at the bottom of the screen here. All police officers can't be mental health caseworkers. And that's both true and false. European countries now have started to make sure that every person who serves as a police officer, that serves as a correctional officer, is trained to have the skills to do mental health intervention, trained to have the skills to care for people, not just react. So it's not just forced compliance that they're engaging in. They're trying to respect the needs of the person who might be in crisis and try to find ways to resolve that. Perhaps if we thought about policing in different ways, we might come to different conclusions. But Sister Fry was correct that policing in our nation really did begin with the notion of forced compliance. It began with people who were trained to capture those who were, quote unquote, escaped enslaved people trying to be free. But those who were trying to capture them, in order to capture them, they had to make them frightening to the larger public, so that they'll help them keep an eye out for dangerous Black Jim who's coming through the community. And police forces were these fugitive slave catchers, quote unquote. This sort of gives rise to what we think about as criminal justice today. So what does that say? It says automatically blackness and brownness is already criminalized. Number two, it says that we can utilize any means necessary to hold them accountable and to bring them back into accountability. It's this sort of mindset that exists within policing that makes, I grew up watching, what was it, 1 Adam 12 as a kid. And, the police, they're here to protect and to serve. I remember that. But when they move into the Black community, it's to criminalize and demonize. And we've got to begin to change that culture if we're going to have any opportunity to have a good working relationship between communities of color and the police departments.
And can I also add on to that too? With any type of work that you do with community, any type of service, you are trained about how to deal with those individuals. If you are someone who's an EMT, if you're a flight attendant, any of these things that have to deal with safety to the public, you are trained for that. The thing is that there's not any funds given to specific training for people who have mental illness or anything that, any bias training, any training that has to deal with knowing your community, going in and spending time with your community, learning about people's differences and cultures. That kind of stuff is not given to our police force. And it should be.
Well, let's look at this example of the young man that was murdered in Memphis. Did you see his physique? He was not a big guy. He was just tall. But every one of those cops that beat him to death looked like fullbacks. Now, he didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a gun or a knife. Why couldn't one of those brothers just walk up to him and say, "Hey, bro, hold on," and put his arms around him and say, "Let's work this out," instead of going for the damn gun? That bothers me, because even in my community, Maryland and DC, I go to the store a lot. I do this, that, and the other, and I don't care who you are. If I see you, I'm gonna speak to you. People that I don't know, I just walk up to them and I say, "Hey, how you doing, brother?" "Oh, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. How you doing?" Words of kindness, compassion, love. Where the hell have we gone wrong that we can't show somebody love? That bothers me.
I think it's just our world now. I think our world is less sympathetic to those kind of things, and that you are in a minority if you lead with that kind of mentality. But I also believe too, there are people that are attracted to a particular type of workforce. There are people that are attracted to being law enforcement. There are people that have control issues. And even though they go through a mental testing before they do that, understand that you're going to get some that are going to seep through. There's also the crowd mentality and the fact that you're in an aggressive field, that you're going to act aggressively. I'm going to give you an example. Most athletes that play football, which is an aggressive sport, find it hard to transition into society, as well as people in the military find it hard to transition into society once they've been in an aggressive, heightened type of atmosphere. Right. So what we need to do is there needs to be constant teaching, constant, reaching out and seeing if people need to talk about any aggressions that they're feeling or anything that they're feeling, or any PTSD that they may be feeling as a result of the job itself. That is where the funding would come in.
Yes.
I agree with you.
I agree with Les.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also there should be in addition to a constant monitoring, at a certain point, you have to make the decision to take people off the street because they have become too aggressive. They have become desensitized. A 20-year career on the street when you become desensitized. And the other issue is that they do not value Black human life. Black men became less valuable after emancipation than they were prior to emancipation because they couldn't get a free workforce from them. And so they were in the most dangerous period after emancipation, even though they used terroristic tactics to keep them in line, they became even more dangerous in the eyes of others. As freemen, they were under the control of the slave plantation system. And that's when we saw the criminalization of Black men and placement in prison just for simply not working or for being on the streets or for not signing a work contract. They would put them back in prison where they could control them again.
And also, when Black men stopped saying yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, to white folks, that was a problem. But what about this fellow, this Asian that killed all of those people out in Monterey, California, day before yesterday? They said he had a history of starting trouble, but it was always starting trouble because he was saying, you come to take my job. The Latino people that I know, they work hard. They don't come to take anybody's job. They'll do jobs that you won't do and take less money to do it. So this has become a very vivid and wide human issue of folks not taking the time to get to know the guy next door or the lady up the street, you know.
I think that's perpetuated, though. I think it's perpetuated in the stereotypes that we view on TV, what our politicians are telling us. All of this stuff is driving a division between us because let's face it, we live in a caste system here in America. And where there is division, there's someone is making money off of it. So what we're seeing here is not necessarily just the simple fact or whatever we saw of this man saying that he's shooting up Monterey, California because somebody's coming to take his job. He's also an immigrant. This is a perpetuated society. Things are perpetuated for a reason, heightened between races for a reason. Understand that if we ever unify as people of color in this country, there would be hell to pay here. And underlying that is this situation that's going on.
What can we do to start making a change? What can we do? The five of us. What can we do to make this situation better? Tony?
I can just quickly, I'll just say one thing.
I think that we've already started.
People know their rights.
Mm-hmm.
People need to know their rights.
Absolutely.
That's my
Rodney, did you have your hand up, Doctor?
I would certainly say one of the things I think that we need to do is we need to begin to think outside of the box. These programs that we've had in the past that have worked towards quote unquote racial justice have unfortunately not lived up to what they needed to do. They've all been piecemeal. They focused on single issues: police reform, education, healthcare, in a silo. We need to begin to think bigger. I love the way Dr. Barber talks about, we need to think about fusion politics. How do all of these issues interrelate with each other? We need to think intersectionally, bringing these issues together in one collective effort. Because if you are racialized in a supremacist society, It's going to impact your education, your health care, your housing, your employability, the amount of money you're able to make, where you're able, I mean, all of the dimensions of your life will be impacted. So I think the first thing we need to do is to think systemically. How do we not change just individual people's hearts, but how do we change the systems in which we live to make them less governed by our understanding of race and racial divisions? And it also, I think, begins with some education. How do we educate the general public to recognize the problems with racialized thought, the way that it manifests itself in our country? And then how do we, I love this term, I work with a project called the Reimagining America Project. And the point is to reimagine, what would it look like if we got it right? What would our country look like if we fixed healthcare, housing, all of these things, and made it such that race was no longer an impediment, no longer gave people a hierarchical way of thinking? What would it look like? And then once we have that in our minds, once we have that vision, that collective vision, we need to work toward manifesting that, work towards making our society look like it should look, what God says it should look like.
Thank you, Rodney. Carolyn, you had something to say. I heard you. Go ahead.
No, but it seems like this violence in our country's have 5 police officers, Asians killing Asians. We have a mental health problem in this country. Mm-hmm. We have a gun problem in this country. And I like what Reverend Sadler said about intersectionality. We have to take a holistic look at violence in addition to looking at the violence against minorities. We are like the canary in the coal mine. We're the first ones, and now it's spreading.
Okay.
Dr. King in his last days, he had the campaign, the People's Campaign, he was beginning to look at this whole Poor People's Campaign, and he was beginning to look at what we were, as Black people, were experiencing holistically, not just from the Black perspective, but from people of color's perspective. And that's what we need to begin to look at now, not just Black and brown people, but all people of color, all marginalized people, all oppressed people, to find our common together. But what we had talked about earlier, they're very keeping us divided, so we never reach that common ground where we can address the issue as a group, as a whole.
Okay, it seems like the hour is gone. What happened to it? So let's do this. Carolyn, I'm going to consider what you said to be your closing thoughts and closing words. Tony Leon, my brother, your closing thoughts. And before you say that, will you all come back again?
Glad to.
Yeah.
Rodney?
Sure.
All right.
You know I'm 120% with you anytime you do anything, my brother.
I know. Okay, bro. So, Tony.
The world is changing, and this country is changing too. The European population is shrinking, and they are acting on that, what is going on. Those of us who see what is going on, we need to play our part in making progress at the same speed that the technology has made progress. We need to catch up and make social and human progress at the same time.
Thank you so much, Tony. You'll come back again, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Leslie, I see you got your beautiful cat there. Your thoughts, your closing thoughts.
you know, this is how I feel about it. What we may be speaking of might seem like a utopian society to people, but there are other countries that are making this work for their people. You've got, you know, the Netherlands, Denmark. They don't have this violence that we have in America. They don't have this division. They take care of their people. They have socialized medicine. They take care of their old. And these are things and examples that we should look at because it does exist. I always tell people to always visit other countries to see how the other half lives. And you get a surprise because America is not everything. There are other people that are making this work for them. The other thing I would say is support these type of shows. Support shows where people are educated and talking about your things. Educate yourself. Educate yourself about what's going on. Do not look at the media because the media could distort things. Start educating yourself on the things that are happening regarding this country. Take bias classes that will tell you about other cultures so that you can learn about other countries' cultures so that you're not ignorant of those things. We have everything to our fingertips now. There's no reason and no excuse for you not to learn.
Thank you. My closing thoughts are, we are all members of one family, the human family. And we need not forget that. You cut me, my blood is red, I'll bleed. I cut you, your blood is the same way, red. The only difference is the outside appearance. So I think what we need to do as a people, we need to learn how to talk to each other and not at each other. If there's a conflict, sit down and talk about it. There ain't nothing in this world you can't sit down and talk about except for talking to a politician, because they ain't listening to nothing. We need to also, I don't know about y'all, but you know, God has always been a very big part of my life, still is. Even though I'm a Native American, we call him a different name. But God is at the center of everything, everything. Like I said, talk to your brother, talk to your sister. And don't be afraid when you're in the streets. If you see a group of guys standing on the corner, just walk past them and say, how you brothers doing? And you'll be surprised at the reaction that you'll get. I do it on purpose. I look for the meanest guys in the bunch and say, hey, young brother, how you doing, man? Oh, I'm doing fine. How you doing? The door is open. Don't be afraid to walk through that door. So I'll tell you all this, what my grandfather used to always say. What is it all about? And he would ask us over and over again when we were little kids. And my cousin Mikey would look at him and said, I don't know, Grandpa, tell us what it's all about. He'd stand up, place his right hand over his heart, and look at us and smile. It's how you treat my heart. And the heart has no color. The heart has the ability to love and forgive. So it's all about how you treat my heart. So I'll say to all of you all in Cherokee tonight, Danada, Goai, Wado. And Halito to you, Les Fry and the cat. We'll talk to you again next week. Tony, I love you, bro. Carolyn, you know I love you. I met that lady in the emergency room a couple of weeks ago. And Rodney, no question, bro. You know I love you too, man. So we'll talk again next week. Take care.